Thank you, John. Thank you to everyone. Thank you, Melinda. Hello, everyone. I am indeed grateful and count it a great privilege to be able to lend my voice, as many of y'all have lent y'all voices, in some hopes of giving people, some light and some joy. Um, I've wrestled deeply with what to say in the 5 minutes that I've been given, and I'm a storyteller and I live in the South. I live in Georgia. And the best way to kind of communicate what's kind of on my heart is to begin to think about the stories of the people around me. I was recently at a restaurant and I met a woman who is Indian and came to this country by way of Canada. And here she is in an area where I work at a church, Tabernacle Baptist Church, where Reverend Dr. Charles E. Goodman is the pastor. I'm grateful for him. And she works at one of the schools in the area. She can't vote, but she has the stakes in the direction of this country because she's teaching our children. And here we are, I'm talking to her at the restaurant, and she talks about how hard it is to be who she is and to do what she's doing. And where all the assaults on freedom and justice and education is happening in our country, it's not theoretical, it's her life. And then there are the people that I live and worship with every day, Black people, this previous Sunday where we had our back to school Sunday. And our pastor usually prays over all these students from our area. And many of these students, are coming out of the COVID years, and their parents and their administrators stood with them, and we prayed over them and prayed for their support. We prayed for resources. We prayed for their safety because we're facing gun violence. We prayed over their minds and their bodies and their spirits because our children are tired. Oftentimes, our children have very little hope in. And for me, as I'm sitting here thinking about that, I'm thinking about how are we accountable to one another? And what does it mean to be accountable to a person that you're around and whom you're called to love? And that's not the only stories. Here I am at the pool at my neighborhood, and there's another teacher who just had a young girl who came from Yemen. She speaks hardly any Arabic, speaks hardly any English. And here this teacher has to care for this young girl who's living in a world of her own, trying to figure out how to live. And here the teacher is trying to use Google Translate just to teach this child and give them a shot at life. And there's another one of my friends who's Muslim, and as everything been going down in the Middle East, she's Jordanian. And if anybody know anything about Jordanians, many of them, their ancestors are Palestinian. And there's a group of people from the local church who have stood with them in the American South at risk of everything on the corner saying that they want to love them because they are accountable to them. And here she is saying how afraid she is in this moment. And why do I tell you these stories? Because I'm reminded of when Martin Luther King was murdered in 1968. And a few months later, the World Council of Churches gathered together in July of 1968. And in Martin's stead, James Baldwin was to speak. And Baldwin said that right now, we're in a time where we're losing a kind of spontaneity, a kind of joy, a kind of freedom. And I think in this moment, many people are struggling with that. Whatever we believe about this moment, one thing is true is that this moment is quite possibly going to be the hardest months we're going to have to endure as people. We speak of joy, but the facts is that like joy is a hard fought emotion and experience. And in the midst of trying to attempt to get to that type of joy, one has to wrestle deeply, especially as a person of faith, How can I be accountable to another person who is afraid and wants to experience joy in a moment in which they feel they are losing presently, no matter who they are? And so that the call of the Christian in that moment is simply to do as we have been called by our Christ, is that the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but I've come that they may have life and life to the full. And so the question becomes for us, what can we do to be accountable to our neighbor so that they may experience the fullness of life, no matter where they find themselves? And so this fall, for me, as a Black Southerner, as a son of the South and a baby of the Black church, it means me throwing my weight